The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Strike averted in New York that could have affected 1.5 million people. Meanwhile, New Jersey sends another union member to Congress. And today on the show, the National Labor Office of Blue Cross Blue Shield and the latest from the North Coast Labor Federation. Welcome to the Monday, April 20th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have a total of 3 guests joining us on the show today. The first 2 come from the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, one of the many proud sponsors of America's Workforce. We're going to be joined by their executive director, that would be Merrilee Logue. And with her is a senior vice president of market solutions, and that would be Kari Hedges. Now, she's got an interesting role. She focuses on shaping market strategies, leading national solutions that support the Blue Cross Blue Shield companies all across commercial, government, individual, and labor markets. And she's got a couple of interesting stories to share. It's always the stories that are compelling on this show. And Kari has not one, but actually 2 of them. So she'll be along with Merrilee. Then we're going to go to Pat Gallagher on behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation. And as you know on this show, I'm a big proponent of union brothers and sisters getting involved in politics to make a change, a significant change for workers. Pat's going to talk about that. In fact, last week we featured Brian Poindexter on the show. He's an iron worker in northeastern Ohio. He's running for a seat in Congress. And there's a couple of more. And there's one that I didn't find out about until the other day, and his name is Scott Tabor. He is a first-time candidate in Eaton Township. That's in northwest Ohio. How about this? He's a retired member of Local 33, Sheet Metal Workers International, and a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles. So a lot of union brothers and sisters getting involved in politics. Maybe they're listening to America's Workforce and saying, hey, you know, if Flash is talking about it, maybe I should run. I don't know if that's the case, but anyway, it sounds pretty good. We'll see what happens, especially throughout the course of the year. We got a lot of primaries, early voting happening in a number of states as we speak. Also, some good news. Cleveland Cliffs is hiring. Pat's going to talk about that and also touch on the tariffs. So Pat Gallagher, president of the North Coast Labor Federation, yet another sponsor of America's Workforce. We appreciate that. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Union leaders representing thousands of New York City apartment house door persons, superintendents, and other workers said on Friday they have reached a tentative contract agreement with building owners, thus averting a strike which could have affected 1.5 million people. The deal came just days before nearly 34,000 workers' contracts with an array of private building owners would have expired at midnight tonight. The strike would have been the first in 35 years, and some apartment dwellers across the city had been bracing to haul trash, postpone renovations and major deliveries, and volunteer to staff lobby doors and even mop the hallways. Can you imagine that? Our goal, well, it was pretty simple: to raise the wage to a level that our members can live in this city, to protect health benefits, and to improve pensions. That came from Marty Pastryke, who is the president of the union. He called the proposed contract an incredibly good deal for both sides. Now, workers will vote by May 28th on the tentative agreement, which includes pay raises and a 15% pension boost. Average annual wages for a door person or porter, for example, would rise from about $62,000 now to $71,000 in 4 years, and a new training program would offer future hires a faster route up the wage scale. At the same time, the tentative deal gives building owners a break on some payments into a health fund that has built up a reserve. The building owners also retreated from proposals to have employees start paying health insurance premiums to create a new job classification for future hires. Again, the workers will vote on that come May 28th. Well, the New Jersey State AFL-CIO is proud to announce they have sent another union member to Congress to represent the 1 million members and their families. That person, and I hope I pronounce her name correctly, is Ananelia Meha, who's a member of SEIU. She won a special election. She will be the second union member in New Jersey following their union brother, Congressman Don Norcross, who comes from the IBEW, to serve in Congress. So, with 2 union members in Congress, New Jersey is the first to achieve this impressive feat for working families, according to the AFL-CIO there. Many of the unprecedented achievements are being made possible by the success of the New Jersey State AFL-CIO Labor Candidates Program. I've talked about that on the show. I mean, that was the first in the nation. And as a result, listen to this, as a result, that program has led to 1,355 union members to date, getting them involved in politics and making sure that they cross the finish line and win the election, like just what happened in New Jersey. Now, the head of the state federation there is Charles Wakanek, and he said increasing worker political power is directly linked to electing working people through our labor candidates program. Amen to that. Congratulations to the state of New Jersey. You know, all this week and into next week, in honor of Workers' Memorial Day, which is actually next Tuesday, we're looking back at the workplace tragedies that forced this country to take worker safety seriously and the laws that were born because of them. So we're going in chronological order, which means we start way back. 1860, at a mill in Massachusetts, where the story of American workplace safety truly begins. Now, the sponsor making this series possible is the National Labor Office at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, loggers, and miners. Well, in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. Here's the date, January 10th, 1860, Lawrence, Massachusetts. Without any warning, the 5-story Pemberton Mill collapsed, trapping hundreds of workers in the rubble, many of them women and children. Then, as rescuers worked through the wreckage in the dark, a lantern ignited the debris. The building caught fire with survivors still pinned inside. Well, when it was all over, more than 145 people were dead and over 160 were injured. Investigators found the cause: substandard cast iron columns, a weak foundation, and corners cut by ownership, all in pursuit of profits. Well, it took 17 more years, but Pemberton Mill helped spark the Massachusetts Factory Act of 1877, the first workplace safety law in U.S. history. It required building inspections, ventilation, fire escapes, and outward opening doors. Everything that should have already existed. So this is where the story of American worker safety begins. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LiUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Right now, I'm joined by Merrilee Logue. Merrilee is the Executive Director of the National Labor Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Merrilee, great to have you back. And we have a very special guest joining us today as well. Welcome, Kari Hedges. Talk to me about her.
Thanks, Flash, for having us back. And I'm really excited for today's conversation. Kari is an incredible leader in our organization and someone who has dedicated an extraordinary career to improving healthcare in this country. But I'm going to let Kari tell a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Merrilee, and thank you, Flash, for having me. I'm so happy to be here with both of you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kari Hedges, and I have the pleasure to serve as a Senior Vice President of Market Solutions at the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. In my role, I focus on shaping market strategies and leading national solutions that support our Blue Cross Blue Shield companies across commercial, government, individual, and of course, labor markets. My work is centered on helping Blue Cross Blue Shield plans succeed, strengthening provider networks, improving how we work together across the healthcare industry, and using data to transform healthcare. I'm humbled by my role in the Blue system and the role that the Blues play in supporting coverage for over 100 million people across the country, and I'm super passionate about making a better system of health. And I will say one thing that makes today's podcast especially meaningful for me is that this April marks my 30th anniversary with the Blue Cross Blue Shield companies. 30 years. It's hard to believe. When I look back at where we started and where we are today, the transformation has been remarkable. I'm genuinely proud to have been part of it.
Well, congratulations on that. 30 years is an incredible achievement. And I imagine working in and around the labor market has given you, Kari, a real appreciation for the people your work ultimately serves. I wonder if you could speak to that.
It absolutely has, Flash. The labor market has always been close to my heart. Working families, union members, trade people, public employees. These are the people who work hard and they count on their health benefits, and they deserve a healthcare system that works just as hard as they do to work that way for them.
No, I love that. Now, Kari, I heard that you have a personal story from your college days that really puts into perspective how much healthcare has changed over the course of your career. Can you share that story with us?
Of course, I would love to. My personal story goes back to a time when healthcare system was not as connected as it is today. At this point in time, my mom was a high school math teacher in a suburb of Chicago with Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance through her teachers union. When I was in college in Kentucky, I had a hospital ER visit. I remember very vividly the challenges my family had getting the bill for the services I had paid for because the coverage I had was from Blue Cross Blue Shield outside the state of Kentucky. At the time, Blue Cross Blue Shield did not have the connectivity we have today, so my mom ended up having to contact her union representative for help in getting the claim resolved. You fast forward today, I spend my days at the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association working on programs and services that make sure individuals don't have that same experience that I did back in the 90s. And just as an example, today we handle over 400 million claims on an annual basis for members who get care outside the market of their local Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. As I said earlier, I'm really humbled by the opportunity and privilege to serve 1 in 3 Americans, including the 18 million union members who have Blue Cross Blue Shield service today.
Kari, that emergency room story really hits home for many of us.
So let's dig into that a little more. When you look back over your career and where healthcare stands today, what do you think has gone really well?
There's a lot to celebrate, Flash. The evolution of how healthcare is delivered has been profound. When I started in the industry, we were launching electronic data interchange for claims. At the time, we had paper medical records and fax machines. Claims were being handled through mail. Today, fast forward, 98% of healthcare claims are processed electronically. That's an enormous leap forward, and it happened because of people in this industry working together and being committed to building something better.
And it's not just the administrative paperwork side that has evolved. One of the most meaningful shifts I've seen in the growing recognition of behavioral health as a core part of overall health. For as long as mental health was treated as separate, almost secondary to physical care. That is changing, though. Union members face real pressures, long hours, physical demands, stress. Recognizing that behavioral health is just as important as every other aspect of care is a huge step forward.
Absolutely, Merrilee. The advancements in behavioral health treatment has been tremendous. And very closely connected to that is the rise of telehealth, which has been a game changer in terms of meeting patients where they are. Whether someone is in a rural area with limited access to doctors or therapists, whether they're working a shift that makes it hard to get to a doctor's office, or simply are more comfortable seeking mental health support from their home, telehealth has really opened doors that were previously closed for a lot of people. The pandemic accelerated, but the need was always there.
That's such an important point. Meeting people where they are, physically, emotionally, and logistically. It sounds like the healthcare system is catching up to how people actually live their lives.
That's exactly the right way to think about it, Flash. And at Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies, that's our goal. It's to build a system that works for the patient, not one the patient has to work around.
So, with all that progress, what are the areas where you see the biggest remaining opportunities? Kari, what do you think?
Well, it's a great question, Flash. And I think the best way for me to answer that is to share another personal story. Because for me, this isn't abstract, it's very real. And again, this story is about my mom. In the last couple years, her health was declining rapidly. She was seeing many doctors, most of who were within the same healthcare system, but they weren't talking to each other. They weren't looking at what was in her electronic medical records. They weren't seeing the signals that were right there in front of them, explaining her rapid decline. Each doctor was treating her only for the episode that was happening in that very moment. She was hospitalized repeatedly, dehydration, and other complications. However, no one was connecting the dots. It turned out that she had a prior surgery where a foreign object, sort of a technical medical term, had been identified as being left behind, and it started to strangle her stomach and esophagus. Food simply wasn't passing through. When someone's not getting nutrition, you can imagine how quickly they start to deteriorate. We were lucky because we eventually found a specialist who was willing to take a hard look at what was happening. But he was in a different healthcare system entirely, so they didn't have access to her past records. They asked us to help facilitate getting access to those so they can see all the experiences she had previously had. And when we contacted her original healthcare system, they told us it would be at least a week before we could obtain her records. And we'd have to go physically to their office to pick up a CD to take across the state to the other hospital. Who even uses CDs anymore? So I got creative. I used my mom's patient portal password. I took screenshots of every record I could get access to, lab results, x-rays, scans, scopes, and I saved them. And I uploaded them directly to her new doctor's portal. Because of that, her new physician was able to review her full history, look at her scans with fresh eyes, and recognize what others had missed. And she went into emergency surgery. While that experience is very personal to me, it's also about people like your family members and your friends. People who need healthcare and need their doctors talking to each other. My mom was lucky because I knew how to navigate the system. You cannot get better outcomes without data being interoperable and accessible to all that need it. The problem isn't that doctors and healthcare systems don't care. They do. The problem is that the systems that they work in aren't built to talk to each other. When a patient's information doesn't follow them seamlessly from one doctor to next, care can suffer. And that is the interoperability we, as the Blues, and myself personally, are working to solve.
Kari, that story is so powerful, and I know it will resonate to so many people listening to this podcast. So many union families have had similar situations navigating a sometimes confusing healthcare system during an already stressful time. What does solving the interoperability problem actually look like? And what we mean by interoperability is, that all aspects of the healthcare system are actually working together in unison without any hiccups in communication or exchanging of information, where people aren't picking up CDs or driving fax that come in to a doctor's office.
That's right, Merrilee. It means providers, hospital systems, doctors, and healthcare payers like Blue Cross Blue Shield working together far more closely than they have ever in the past. That's why Blue Cross Blue Shield has built an interoperability hub focused on clinical data exchange so that a patient's doctor can access a comprehensive, real-time picture of that person's health. We are currently exchanging clinical messages for hundreds of thousands of members, and we want that to scale dramatically.
One thing I know is that prior authorization, that's another area where a lot of patients and providers feel the pain of a disconnected system. So what is being done there? Kari, for you, what do you think?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Flash. Prior authorization is one of the biggest friction points in healthcare today, and it's one we're absolutely committed to solving. Today, the use of electronic means for prior authorization significantly trails the claims experience I mentioned earlier. Nearly half of all prior authorizations are still submitted by phone, fax, and mail, and that's not good enough. To help solve that challenge, the Blues are leveraging an industry standard, essentially a common language for health data, to make prior authorization faster and more automated. A recent study with Blue Cross Blue Shield Plan and a provider group called Multicare Connect Care showed that when using this common language, 84% of cases didn't even require prior authorization at all. That determination can be made instantaneously, making patients' access to care faster. And for those that did require prior authorizations, approvals that used to take days were happening in a fraction of a time. Provider staff experienced up to 230% improvement in efficiency. It's our goal to have the prior authorization approvals processed before the patient leaves the doctor's office.
So what that means for union members is fewer delays, less stress, faster access to the care their doctors have prescribed. It means someone who needs surgery or a specialized treatment isn't waiting unnecessarily while the paperwork catches up. This is a real, tangible difference in people's lives.
Now, Kari, there's another topic that's on everyone's mind these days when it comes to the future of healthcare. And that is, 2 words, artificial intelligence. So, how does AI fit into all of this?
It has enormous potential in healthcare, Flash, and we have to approach it responsibly. Everyone's talking about it, and when it's used well, AI, as we're already starting to see, can help identify gaps in care, like health risk earlier, streamline administrative processes like some that we've talked about here today, and support clinical decision-making in ways that save time and improve patient outcomes. The interoperability work, that connectivity between providers, doctors, hospital systems, as well as with their health plans that we've been talking about, really is a foundation that makes AI possible. Because AI is only as good as the data it has access to. If patient data is fragmented and siloed, AI can't really do its job. But if the information flows seamlessly across the healthcare ecosystem, AI can start to unlock insights that would be impossible to find manually.
And the responsibility piece is really critical. We're talking about people's health, their most personal information. Any use of AI has to be transparent, it has to be equitable, and always centered on what is best for the patient. That is our commitment, Flash. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies, we take that very seriously.
That's exactly right, Merrilee. And I wanted to add that I believe that we are now in a generation that gets to realize some of the biggest advancements in healthcare history. What we've imagined is starting to become a reality. And what that means ultimately is that our work to help millions of Americans be healthier and spend more time with the people they love, that's what's important, and that's what drives me. That's what makes my 30 years feel like it's been worth every moment.
Kari, that is a beautiful note to end on, and thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story, your expertise, and your passion. Any final words before we sign off?
Flash, I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about something I care about so deeply. To our listeners, to this podcast, be engaged in your healthcare, ask questions, know your healthcare benefits, and know that there are people like Merrilee working every single day to make the system better for you and your families.
Thank you, Kari. And I just want to say, Flash, thanks for the opportunity, because we know that helping support American workers and their families so they can live their healthiest lives is our goal at Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies. And if anybody wants to follow our team, we sponsor labor events, conferences, and conventions all year long. And if listeners want to stay connected, you can follow us at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and on X, formerly Twitter.
Fantastic. And once again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to check in with Pat Gallagher on behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to line number 2. Welcome back to the show. Longtime supporter of America's Workforce on behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation. Mr. Pat Gallagher serves as president, also retired from the Steelworkers Union, and a lot of news about steel today and tariffs. Pat, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us once again. And there's some good news to throw in there. I guess they're hiring at Cleveland Cliffs, but talk to me about these tariffs here. It's a year now that it was a Liberation Day, according to the president, that we're seeing tariffs on, we're seeing tariffs off. The Supreme Court said no, but that doesn't seem to matter. Talk to me about what's going on here and how it's affecting workers. Go ahead, brother.
Well, the tariffs are in effect, Flash. Are off and on, as you said. But the prices going up pretty good. The CRU, which is the benchmark for the steel price index, the futures are traded at $1,046 a ton for hot rolled coil, which is a good price for the companies. And the prices are forecasted to increase. We don't know if this is just a subject of overall inflation or if it's just increased demand or the industry moving forward. But it's a good price for the companies to make some money, and hopefully we'll be in good shape coming up, because in the summer this year, basic steel negotiations with the steel workers occur. Our contracts with Cleveland Cliffs and U.S. Steel expire on September 1st. So we're probably going to go into negotiations for a new agreement, probably sometime in the summer. Our president, Dave McCall, who just retired, has agreed to stay on as the head of the U.S. of the bargaining for the steel workers. So that's a plus for us. So we're hoping that the industry is in pretty good shape come around bargaining time, and we can get a good contract for our members going forward.
Pat, if you don't mind, I want to talk briefly about trade here, because coming up this summer is a renegotiation of the USMCA, which often is called NAFTA 2.0. And we had, obviously, relations with Mexico years ago with NAFTA. Those jobs went to Vietnam, went to China, and now China found ways to go through Mexico to get their products into the United States. And we saw hundreds of thousands of jobs lost under the USMCA, and I'm sure that's, raising some eyebrows in Washington. What are you hearing about those talks? I think they're going to happen sometime in July.
Well, Flash, as you know, trade's a very complicated subject. There's so many moving parts and so many different things, and there's so much cheating going on in trade too. You can remember a couple of years ago, I talked about how Chinese companies were importing steel into Canada, getting them stamped made in Canada, then shipped them to the United States for import to avoid all the duties on the Chinese steel. So there's a lot of a lot of moving parts here, and we hope that, they listen to reason and get some kind of reasonable agreement that we could all live by and enforce. That is the main thing. We need to enforce these trade agreements so there's a level playing field for all manufacturers.
All right, Pat, let's switch gears here and talk about the primary coming up. We just aired our interview with Brian Poindexter, who's running for a seat in Congress in Northeastern Ohio. We're seeing more and more union brothers and sisters get involved in politics. Brian is one of them. Talk to me about the landscape here, what you see ahead here in the primary.
Well, early voting started last week. Traditionally in a non-presidential election year, the primary turnout is very low. We're hoping that we can get our members out there and encouraged to vote, because the situation in our country has made it really clear to me and hopefully to everyone else how important politics really is and affects every day of your life. So I think we need to get our members motivated and get them out to vote. We also have a number of other, besides Brian, and wish Brian the best, we have other union members that are running for office. We have Davita Russell, who's the Secretary-Treasurer of the North Coast Area Labor Federation and holds a bunch of other union offices with her union Oaksey AFSCME. She's running for the 18th House District for the Ohio House of Representatives. She has a contested primary. Well, I hope she can prevail in that. We also have Scott DeMauro, who's a former president of the Ohio Education Association, and he has an uncontested primary. He's running in the 16th district. We're really getting behind these candidates because we believe we need to have union people in legislative positions so we can, bring to the table and bring to the forefront the issues that working people face every day.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. The primary in Ohio is on May 5th. Pat, you take care. Pat Gallagher on behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation. Talk to you next month, okay, brother?
All right. Thanks, Flash.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, Sean McGarvey, president of the North American Building Trades. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.